This is Metal Mike, and in this episode we talk to an amazing vocalist, Todd Michael Hall. We talk all about his new killer solo album, Sonic Healing. We also talk some Riot V, Jack Starr's Burning Star, and what it was like being on NBC's The Voice. Hair metal fans, don't freak out. This is just episode 91. It's not about 1991. It's a good conversation. Check it out. Well, Todd, welcome to the 80's Glam Metalcast, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mike, man. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And hey, man, you got a new album out, Sonic Healing, and I'm loving it. I'm digging the late 70s, early 80s classic rock vibes on here, man. It's very good.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it was definitely the inspiration. I call it classic rock inspired, so it's definitely what I was shooting for and hoping to achieve, and so I felt like we kind of hit the nail on the head, but obviously, you don't know for sure until you get feedback from people. So
that's true. Why do this kind of style right now? Well, is this something you've always wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a type of music that I really love, and it's something that influenced me when I was younger, and I think part of it really is twofold. I think it was just I'd done a lot of about 7 heavy metal albums in a row. And I love that kind of music, but to me, I was in the mood for something a little bit different. And then I figured for solo stuff, it's nice. I think there were some people that were like expecting it to be more of a heavy metal album, but I don't know. I'm already in Riot, so I didn't feel a real need to try to come out and be Riot, but not without the rest of the guys in Riot. I wanted to do something a little different.
I think that's the whole point of doing a solo album. I always thought it was weird when somebody would come out and do an album that sounds just like the band that they're with. It's like, why not just do this album with the band that you're in?
Yeah, and I mean, I understand in the sense of, sometimes you just want to be creative all on your own and not have to. But yeah, like when it ends up sounding pretty much the same. I mean, I think where you'll see that too is when you'll have someone who's in a band and they're the principal writer in the band,
right?
And then they do a solo album. And yeah, it sounds just like the band. You're kind of like, well, I'm not sure what the point was, but to each his own thing. I think for me, I was also, just really in the mood to do. To me, when I think of old school classic rock, I mean, I just think of the days when everything was just. I don't know, there was just an excitement and energy about the music and the band and the virtuoso players, and not that like every band was a party band, but there was a lot of positive energy about all the music, and it was on the radio, and it was just associated with good times, and I think for me that's what I wanted to. I just wanted to have an album that just had a real positive, energetic, impart energy on people type of vibe. So,
yeah.
And so I was just in the mood for that, I guess, and that's what I hope to achieve anyway.
It definitely has that vibe, and what I can say, man, is it's a really good listen, because I can put it on and I can just go right through the whole thing. I don't feel the need to skip a track, or all the tracks kind of fit together. You know what I mean? It's that same kind of vibe that follows throughout. It's definitely well done.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that's a big compliment. I'm kind of an old school guy. I'm kind of an album listener, and yeah, I mean, I guess I do rip things into my iPod, and I'll run the iPod at random, but I tend to, like, the albums that I usually love are the kind that are like that, where you can put them on and play them the whole way through and, not feel like you're skipping a track, and it just kind of, just becomes the soundtrack. Not that you're necessarily even paying real close attention to every song, you know what I mean, but it's just something you can have on and just enjoy. And, so that's a big compliment, so I really appreciate that.
Oh, definitely. And I think All on the Line is my favorite, but a lot of other songs that stood out to me are like Running After You, the title track, Love Rain Down. I mean, a lot of those are the ones, at least at this point, that are standing out to me.
It was tough for me, it's really hard when you write an album and then to come back and try to think, okay, well, what's going to be the video? What's the song, that, and it's always tough. I think, in working on it, Kurt and I both, Kurt Vanderhoof, who co-wrote all the songs with me from Metal Church, he and I, right from the, pretty early on, were like, wow, Overdrive that's a great album opener. We're thinking that's the album, because it's just got this energy that pulls you in. And then I think, but at first that wasn't really going to be the lead single, and we were debating, what's going to be the lead single? And it's so tough because as you go through and evaluate, like I love Running After You, but it's a little more of a ballad. And I thought, well, it's not really a ballad once it kicks in, but it takes a little while. It takes like 2 minutes to get to the chorus. And so I thought, well, maybe that's not really the one you'd want. And I really love All on the Line too, actually, and I was debating like should that one be it, but then when I listen to it, it's kind of like it just starts on dun 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 dun, dun
Yeah.
you know, and the way it starts, like bottom line is I think we ended up going with Let Loose Tonight because. Joe at the record label really thought that one was kind of indicative of the album as a whole, because it had that definite old school vibe. But the other thing is the way it starts out. It just starts out with energy, so it just draws you kind of right in. And so it's tough, because you sometimes you overthink it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm sure I overthink everything. Joe at the record label was always making fun of me because I'm overthinking everything. But that's what I do. I told him, I'm like, that's what I do, man. That's what I do. So.
Now, what are some of your influences that are coming through strong, in your opinion, on this album?
I think for me, when I think back to my kind of formative years when I was basically young and like starting to, I was probably pre-teen even and getting into rock and, the influences for me was like Styx and REO Speedwagon and Boston and probably a little Triumph and Rush in there. Obviously, I listened to Van Halen, but like I never really thought my voice sounded like David Lee. I mean, I love David Lee, but I never thought my voice sounded like that. So I don't know if he's an influence on me. And then I don't know, as I got going a little bit, I got Freddie Mercury from Queens. I remember having that News of the World or whatever album when I was younger. I don't know. The funny thing is, it wasn't even my albums. I had older brothers and my mom would buy albums too, so I was just kind of like listen. You know what I mean? I was kind of listening to whatever they had going. I remember Ted Nugent was in the mix and everybody. And Ted Nugent used to have some, like Derek St. Holmes was a great singer and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think a lot of that. And then as I got older and got to where I was like 14, 15 years old, that's when the heavy metal started to kind of come in, and I was really in love with Jeff Tate at the time, and even Eric Adams from Manowar, which might make some people scratch their heads, but I think he's got a stupidly amazing voice because he can sound like clean and do opera if he wants to, but he can also sound kind of more like an animal, if you know what I mean. Not like maybe the Cookie Monster stuff nowadays, but he can really get the growl stuff going, which I thought was kind of cool, which is something I'm not really capable of. I don't have much of that. I'm pretty hopelessly clean, so I tend to be drawn to the singers that are maybe a little more like me in that regard,
Right.
So, but yeah, I think those are probably the influence that come out. I mean, I think what's interesting on this album, the one thing that surprised me is I've listened to a lot of Rush, right? Because they were on the radio and they were just one of those cool bands that you would hear all the time. But I guess I never really thought about Geddy Lee being an influence on me. Yet there seems to be quite a few people saying, "Man, he sounds like Geddy Lee on this." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
I wasn't shooting to, but apparently, sometimes there's just I think at this point, I just sing. I'm not. Sometimes I hear people, and when I hear them, it sounds to me like they're doing something to their voice to make it sound the way it does. And you know what I mean? To get a certain tone or a certain pronunciation and stuff like that. And I think on this one, it's just like, hand me a piece of music and I just start singing, and that's just what my voice sounds like. So I feel like, I don't know if I sound unique or anything, but I feel like it's definitely me, you know what I mean? That's kind of how I would do it. Although I do think there's a pre-chorus, the pre-chorus of Running After You. It's not like I planned it, but for some reason I think there's something about the chords that Kurt is playing and the line I'm singing. That's I don't know. I must be ripping off a Rush song or something, because that pre-chorus, riding on an endless wave, that just. It screams Rush to me so hard. I'm like, what song am I stealing that from? I got to go look it up, and maybe somebody will tell me one of these days.
Yeah, no,
and then,
I hear it there. I hear the Rush there, because I'm not a big Rush fan at all. And there's that one little part where I hear that. I'm like, oh, that reminds me of Rush, that little pre-chorus piece. You're right.
Yeah, and I think it's not just the vocal. I think it's some sort of combination of that chord and the melody or something.
Yep.
And maybe subconsciously I'm ripping them off. I don't even know. But to me, then a song the song Like No Other, that one's got kind of almost more challenging singing. It's a little more consistently high, not real high, like heavy metal screaming high, although there is the one song I kind of have a little bit of that in there. That one, when I hear it, and no one else has said it, but to my ears, my vocal sounds a little bit like Empire era Jeff Tate, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's because the song. If you listen to Empire, a lot of the song topics on that album were kind of relationship driven, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's what that song is kind of like. And I think where it's at vocally kind of reminds me of Jeff Tate maybe. So I don't know if I sound like him, but that song makes me. If someone were to tell me that, I would be like, okay, yeah, because felt like I was hearing that. Other than that, I don't know. I don't know who I sound like, I guess.
Well, hey man, I got to backtrack to something you said when you were talking. Is when you said the name Eric Adams, I didn't scratch my head. I made the metal horns. I love Manowar, man. One of my favorite bands. So
nice.
And Eric Adams,
that's awesome.
He makes Manowar for me, man. And you know what's funny? These guys don't live very far from me. We're all upstate New Yorkers. So hopefully our paths will cross someday.
Oh well. You know what's funny is I just way back in like 1983, I think it was, my brother Rick. I had two older brothers. My brother John is one I was in like Harlot with, but then my older brother Rick was like a year and a half older than me. He had a record store called Heavy Metal Unlimited with another friend of ours who's a bit older than us. That's how he was able to swing it, because it's hard to have your own record store when you're a teenager.
Right.
And so he introduced me to a lot of music, so like Malice and Warrior and all this stuff. But Manowar was a band that we all just really loved back then, and we kind of discovered them, I think, around 82, 83, and it was almost like. But when we discovered them, I'm pretty sure it was like. I'm trying to think. I think Sign of the Hammer was the one that we kind of discovered them on, and then we went back, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, Battle Hymns, oh my God, and then we were just so in love with them, and they were just so good. Their first, right up through certainly Kings of Metal, and maybe even a little bit after that, and they're still really good. But I think that the songwriting maybe got a little more stale. Hopefully Joey doesn't strangle me for saying that. Interestingly enough, is that later on. When I got out of singing, like in '96, got out of I wasn't performing. My brother and I had kind of split up working together. He wanted me to sound like Pantera, that style of vocal. And I just can't, I'm not even physically capable of singing that way. Maybe I am, and I just never trained myself. But anytime I've tried, it just hurts my throat, so I don't even bother. And I even bought the Zen of Screaming DVD and watched it. This lady tries to coach me to learn how to do that stuff seriously. And I tried it one time at practice, and it just was ripping me up. I'm like, forget that. So anyway, I split up with my brother in '96, and I was out of it for a while. I was learning how to play guitar, and I was doing things musically, but I wasn't performing, and I was mostly just kind of focused on work and stuff like that. But then around 2004, I saw an ad that Jack Starr was looking for a singer to be on an album that was going to come out on Magic Circle Music, which is owned by the members of Manowar, which is owned by Joey. And I remember my brother Rick saying, well, dude, if anybody would like your style of singing, this might be the band. And interestingly enough, I had Jack Starr's solo album from 1984, because my brother Rick, once again, he had talked me into buying it. Said, "Oh, Rhett Forster's a cool singer. That's a good album. You should buy it." So I remember buying it. The thing is, I don't know if you know that album, but Jack was like sitting there wearing a fedora, just holding the guitar, and I even teased him about it. I'm like, "Dude, this album cover is pretty bad." Really.
He's got better ones now with all the Warriors and stuff.
So I can tease him about it. But in any event, what was cool is I remember, I was a big Manowar fan. So here it is, 2004, and I get an email from someone, "Hey, Joey wants to arrange a conference call with you." And I'm like, "Really?" And I remember it was like Memorial Day weekend, 2004.
Wow.
And I had this conference call with Joey, and it was very, very, for me, it was like kind of mind blowing, because like, this is Joey DeMeo, and I'm like, damn. And so that was pretty cool. And then he ended up inviting me. The way the story worked is there was a guy named Manuel and he still works for Joey, works with Joey. But back then he heard a CD that I had sent in, because they were looking for a singer, and actually Jack and the bass player Ned and stuff, they had settled on a singer. They had settled on this fella named Scott Oliva, who actually, believe it or not, is in my old band Reverence now.
Okay.
But they had so they had decided they wanted Scott Oliva, and he was in like an Iron Maiden tribute band or something. And but then Joey, Manowar told Joey to listen to my CD, and Joey heard it, and he really liked me. And Joey's not a big fan of Iron Maiden, so I think maybe that's why. That's why he wasn't satisfied yet. I don't know. And but in any event, he ended up calling me out there, and I remember telling him, like, hey, I'm a big fan of Eric Adams. Like, is there a way I can meet him when I was out there? And so they flew out, because he's like, well, fly out, come to the studio, we'll meet each other, talk this and that. And I remember flying to their studio. It was their old studio that they're not. It was an old piano factory, and they're not in that studio anymore. They have a different one now, and which I recorded the first album at the different one, because over the few years I was there. Sorry, I tell long stories. But even I flew there, and I remember here I am in their studio, and Eric Adams, he comes in, hey, how you doing? I got to meet him, talk, ask a few questions, like, dude, how did you, whatever made you learn how to sing like that, where you get that growly thing going? And he told me, he's like, well, I just thought, what would an animal sound like? And I'm like, oh man, that's so fitting, Right. But they put me in the sound booth, and I was recording, singing along to some of Jack's songs, and singing some parts. And here I am, singing Day of the Reaper, I think this was one of the songs I was singing, and Eric Adams is on the other side of the glass in the recording booth, I'm in the recording booth, he's in the, whatever you call it, where the soundboard is, and here I am singing with Eric Adams looking at me while I'm singing, dude. It's one of the, most people would be like, whatever, you know what I mean? But for me, it was like, oh my God. Yeah, eventually I ended up playing 2 of the Magic Circle festivals in Germany, and so I have other great stories of, talking to Eric a little more, but also like being up on stage performing and looking to the side and seeing Joey hanging out in his leather pants, listening to us play on the one side and looking at the other side and seeing, Eric Adams jamming along with me and stuff. It was like, that was like 2008, 2009, and it was like, that was my first time playing a show over in Europe, and it was just, I don't know, when I think back to it and how far I've kind of come since then too, but in a way, Joey really gave me my start, because he told Jack, nope, this guy's your singer. So Joey picked me to be in the band. So,
and on one of those albums, you played with Rhino. Played on one of those albums, didn't he? From Manowar. Yep. Rhino.
Rhino. When I got there, like, the music had already been recorded. I know, like, Joe Stump had done some rhythm guitars, and Rhino had recorded the drums, and so it was interesting, because when I first kind of met Jack and we started thinking about trying to play some shows, we were trying to put together like a band, so to speak. It was me and him and Ned, and they had a couple other guys, but nothing could stick or whatever. So the interesting thing is, the first album, Rhino actually played on it, but he wasn't kind of an official member of the band at that time.
Okay.
But in the ensuing couple of years, he ended up moving down to Florida and becoming like an official member of the band, so he's like in the picture of the next 2 albums.
Awesome stuff, man. And then with Reverence, you got to play with Doc Wackles from Sabotage.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
Another one of my favorites.
I mean, while I was, he's just such a nice guy too. He's just a really cool guy, and very just down to earth and friendly and unpretentious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just a really great guy, and it was interesting because I don't know. I was in Jack Starr, Burning Starr, and I got approached by Brian Holland, and he had somehow reformed, and I forget the guy's name. There was a guitar player that founded Tokyo Blade, and Brian had gotten together with that guitar player, and his name escapes me because I knew Tokyo Blade, but I didn't listen to him a lot. Like, I certainly didn't know the members of all the bands, but in any event, so when Brian first called me, he wanted to go and call the band Tokyo Blade, and that's when I was like, nah, I'm not real interested in doing that. Not that I don't like Tokyo Blade, but like that guitar player was gone, so it was going to be none of the original guys and whatnot have you, and I just thought, no. Well, then he called me back and was like, man, I really love your singing, though. Would you like to just write some songs together and see what happens, and da-da-da-da. And so we did, and that's what became Reverence.
Okay.
And I was, so we put some good effort into this couple Reverence albums. I was real proud of those. And the reason that was something that I was interested in is because I got full reign on the vocal melodies and the lyrics and everything. So I felt like it was kind of all mine, which was kind of cool, because in Jack Starr, in Burning Starr, the trouble is Ned and Jack, they live in Florida, so they sit and write songs together. I mean, even Rhinos down there with them. So like I tend to get like what I would call the leftovers. Like they'll send me a song that's partially finished, and I got to just finish it. You know what I mean, or something like that in terms of writing lyrics and stuff. And so it was nice to be able to get involved. And not that I'm, I don't have a problem with Jack and Ned. I totally get it. I'm not there. You know what I mean. And so, but that's what Reverence was for me. It was more of a creative outlet than Burning Starr was, I guess. That's kind of what led to me being in Riot, because the producer of the producer for the Land of the Dead album, which was the second Burning Starr album I did, his fellow's name was Bart Gabriel, and we went over and we played. Bart had helped line us up a couple shows. We played the Keep It True festival, and then 3 other shows over in Europe or Greece or whatever have you, and I think one in Italy and 2 in Greece. So it was like 4 shows, and after those few shows, that was in 2013, and that's when Bart called me and said, hey, he emailed me or messaged me and said, hey, do you know that, Riot's looking for a singer? And I'm like, really? I'm like, I thought they were done, because I knew that Mark Reale had passed away a year earlier. And he said, no, they're trying to reform it, and they're putting it back together, and I think you'd be good for it. And it turns out he had suggested a bunch of singers to Donnie. But some of them didn't work out, and then some of them were from Europe, and Donnie really didn't want to have a singer from Europe because he just figured logistically it'd be too tough.
Sure.
And so I don't know, he hooked Donnie and I up, and I started by recording. They sent me versions of 3 songs off the Immortal Soul album that they did with Tony, because Tony wasn't interested in doing anything, or else they probably would have gone with him. But they sent me 3 songs off Immortal Soul that had the lead vocal taken off, and said, okay, we'll record the vocals. And I sent those back to them, and then he's like, oh, well, all right, we'll try putting vocals on this. And so he sent me Metal Warrior and Ride Hard, Live Free, and I put vocals on it. And I didn't know what was going on. I was waiting for them to let me know what was going on, and all of a sudden Donnie calls me back and said, yeah, I sent those off to the record label, and they really liked them. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even know. So I was actually recording. The funny thing is they announced me being in the band in November of 2013, but I had already written like a few songs for them by then. You know what I mean? Like I'd been in the band really since the summer, I guess you'd say.
Now, were you big into Riot before getting in the band, or?
Not necessarily. Like for me, I lost track of Riot when they got into, the Mike DeMeo era. And I think it's because it was in the 90s when, frankly, I lost track of a lot of heavy metal.
Sure.
I got busy working.
Yep.
I was really focused on the family business at the time, and I actually, so I mean, so I kind of lost track of that. But I mean, I definitely knew the earlier Riot because my brother John used to play like Swords of Tequila in his band when I was too young to even be in the band.
Right.
So I remember singing along to that song, and I remember my brother John buying the Thundersteel album on vinyl, even, and like having it in our basement, and him throwing it on and me listening to it. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like that Tony Moore guy, his vocal, it's like he's on helium, he can sing so high, And I thought, who can sing that? And then it turns out I can.
You can. Big time. And it's funny, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm just kind of getting in the Riot. That, like you said, there's certain bands, just sometimes you miss them. Like it's like I'm really into Manowar, really love Sabotage, but then there's other bands that somehow you're focused in this direction, you miss this band. You don't know. So I never was really familiar with Riot, but when I went back, and I know this week I've been listening to a lot of it before we talked, and I can see where like the original vocalist who passed away, Guy Speranza, you have almost a quality of your voice that's similar to his. So they must like that, for some of the older tracks.
Yeah, I think, if you look at it, really, I mean, with Riot, the biggest album, certainly as far as the U.S. is concerned, their biggest album is the third one, that's Fire Down Under. And then, there is a lot of people that are, what's interesting about Riot is, I'm the 5th singer, so they've had, and as they've changed singers, they've also changed styles pretty massively, because Mark was this guy that would work with the people that he had, and things would change. I mean, he had influences all over, so I mean, he would change the music, and so the original Riot was a kind of a, if you listen like the original album from '77, it's actually like you're like wow, this is '77. Like, who sounded like this back then?
Yeah.
They were kind of a unique band back then. And really, I think one of the, and I don't know if this is technically musically the best way to say it, but it's like Mark liked to play fast, and so like they played rock, but then they would play the riffs kind of fast. And so that's kind of what made them sound, maybe, that's why I like a lot of, what's funny is back then they were kind of considered part of the new wave of British heavy metal, even though they weren't from Britain.
From Britain, right.
Which is kind of funny. And, but the reason is because they were over in London, they were around when Iron Maiden was first starting and some of that, so they kind of almost got lumped into that, even though when you listen to them, the first three albums really was more hard rock, closer to hard rock maybe than it was heavy metal, I don't know. And then what was interesting is when Guy left the band after the third band, they got Rhett Forster, who was a great singer, but he had more of that growl and that attitude and stuff, so then they kind of went to more of like a bluesy, hard rock style. And then, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 albums. I think one was a live album, but I know there was Born in America and Restless Breed, and I always forget the other one, but they had, but when Tony Moore came in, like, what happened is Donnie Van Staveren, who's in the band now, he got involved in the early 90s because Mark Reale used to like to winter down in San Antonio. He loved Texas, he loved the South, he loved all that old cowboy mystique and all that stuff. And so he would summer down in Texas, and there was a guy who somehow was associated with a record label or something, and he hooked up Donnie and Mark so that basically Donnie had a band and Mark would come in and they would just jam together. And so Mark and Donnie started writing songs together, and I know that like Donnie, and Mark worked on songs that ended up being on one of the albums. I think it was the Born in America album. So it was kind of interesting. So Donnie was kind of already involved way back then, and so then after Rhett Forster left the band, Riot kind of reinvented themselves, and Mark and Donnie were doing something they called the band like Narita for a little while, and then they decided, well, we're just going to come back out with Riot, but they specifically wanted to go more in the power metal vein and get a higher singer and all that stuff, and that's when they got Tony Moore, and they switched to Thundersteel, which then, if we were going to argue which album was bigger, certainly in other parts of the world, Thundersteel, I might argue, is bigger. I mean, it's it's hard for me to know. It's hard for me to know for certain, but definitely, like, the closer song has to be the song Thundersteel. You know what I mean? It's like it just seems like the one everybody goes nuts for. So over in in South America and Japan and in Europe, I think Thundersteel might be arguably the biggest album. So if you look at it, sorry, I tell such long stories. Bottom line is, we were talking about the singers and me fitting in with the band. If you look, we tend to play mostly Thundersteel stuff because we're pretty power metal based, and then quite a few songs from the Guy Speranza era.
Okay.
We usually only play about 1, maybe 2 songs from Rhett, one, maybe 2 from Mike DeMayo's era. So consequently, it's kind of good for me because those are the 2 singers that I sound the most like.
Right.
So
yeah.
That's probably why people think I fit in the band so well.
Now, do you think you're in a good position with this? And I'll tell you where I'm going with this. I mean, I think you're early 50s, right? And a lot of these guys, 51. A lot of these guys who are in some of these original bands, I mean, they could be in their 60s or 70s at this point. So, I mean, your voice. I mean, this could happen to anybody at any age, but your voice has probably had a lot less wear and tear and is in really good shape right now, where some of these other guys, some of them can't do it anymore. So, like, when these guys are willing to, want to keep their bands going or do projects, I mean, it kind of puts you in a good spot, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, certainly, I played out when I was a lot younger and all that stuff, and I played out enough to kind of learn how to sing live and all that stuff, but the reality is I think I'm a better singer now than I was back then, especially from working on all these albums the last few years and recording at home and learning about harmonies and all that kind of stuff. So as far as recording and being able to perform and getting my voice to do some of the things that I want to do, and then being able to map out my own harmonies and then being able to sing live and kind of keep my voice healthy and all that stuff, I'm in probably the best spot I've ever been, but I've done a lot more playing than I kind of ever did, really. I mean, I did a lot of playing. I played out quite a bit when I was late teens and early 20s, and then I had that break for a while, and then really didn't, even when I was in Burning Starr doing albums in Reverence, we really weren't playing a lot of shows. So, but now in Riot, I don't know, I've done over 100 shows or whatever with them in the last few years. So, I mean, and I even had a 25-show tour opening up for Primal Fear, 25 shows over 30 days. I mean, I didn't have to sing 2 hours a night, but I've done 7 days in a row with Riot singing 2 hours a night, stuff like that. And I'm not saying I'm invincible, but I've just been very fortunate because the songs kind of fit my vocal pocket, and then I take care of myself. I exercise a lot. I try to be healthy. I don't smoke. I really, I drink a beer after the show. That's about it. Like, I'm not a big partier. I never have been. As far as the drugs and alcohol. I mean, I've never done any drugs, but that's not my thing. But I've never been a big drinker really either. And I think overall, I just have kept myself pretty healthy. And you're true, like you look at somebody like a Don Dokken. I mean, that poor guy's been singing for freaking decades. Right. I mean, of course his voice is going to be a little tired,
Right, exactly.
I mean, it's natural, It's natural. So I think that definitely helps me. And I mean, even now, in Riot, I mean, we play out. I mean, granted, it can be, when we do go play, it's a real challenge, but even then, it's like, we're playing 6 to 8 weeks a year. I have to, I have a full-time job. I mean, I run a manufacturing company for a living, and I know it's funny because, like, sometimes, like, when I was on The Voice, like, every now and then someone would comment and think, well, that's not fair. Why is he on the show? He's a professional musician. It's like, no, I'm not, really. I mean, okay, I get paid to perform here and there, but I really don't make any money doing this,
Right.
I mean, I get what they're saying, but the show is not, the show wasn't about amateurs. Like, you didn't have to be an amateur to try it,
Right. Exactly.
And so the reality is, like, I really don't play out that much and stuff. So I mean, even now, I should be able to keep my voice pretty healthy for a while at this rate. We're at that point where, like, for me to go to the next level, I don't even know if I could do it, because the next level might be, I'm gone for, say, 3 months out of the year or something.
Right.
And I just, like, there's not a lot of money in music anymore. And so financially speaking, I just don't think I could really justify it. Like right now, I just take it off like it's vacation time. And,
right.
And my wife has to be tolerant but if I were to start taking 3 months off, it's going to start taking so much time away from my real job that would be problematic. And I don't think there's any way it would pay for itself. I don't know, if you're a bigger band, maybe you can make a lot of money, but I'll tell you right now, I mean, even in Riot, it's hard to make money playing shows. Everything's so expensive to travel, to do this, do that, and
right.
People don't buy so much music anymore too, so you don't get a lot of money from record labels either. So it's like, I don't know, I always say it's a passion project, because you do it because you just love to perform and you love to write and record music, and and the funny thing is, I think that's what it is for a lot of us in this hard rock, heavy metal category, because, it's not like you make big money doing interviews, and it's not like people make big money, at some of these smaller record labels and whatnot have you. I mean, it ends up being kind of a passion project for a lot of people. I mean, photographers and videographers, a lot of these people, it's the same,
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And you brought up The Voice, and I was going to bring it up. Are you glad that you did The Voice?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I originally went just thinking it would be, well, first of all, I wondered, like, could I get on TV?
Right.
And I still think about it. I still think about it now, and I think, I think about the process that I went through of just kind of like saying, okay, I'll just drive to Chicago, see what happens. Drive to Chicago and, do this open call audition. There was, a couple thousand people there that day, and I was in the afternoon shift, because they could do morning or afternoon, and then they call you 10 at a time into the room, and then you sing a cappella for somebody, and like, I was like, oh, cool, I made it through that. And then afterwards, Zoe's like, all right, well, we want you to, okay, you're going to come back tomorrow. I'm like, tomorrow? Like, what? I'd driven 5 hours to Chicago. I didn't bring anything to spend the night. I'm like, what? So I had to come back the next day with tracks. And so I had to drive all the way home, drive all the way back the next day, and then sing in the studio with some tracks, and get filmed so they could show it to producers, and they liked me there, so they filmed me and showed some more stuff. And then it's like, it's just weird. I think it happened, and there was executive callbacks, and there's a blind audition process, and I think about, oh my God, I made it through all that stuff. It's pretty bizarre, because they tell you that they check out like 30 to 40,000 people,
wow.
So I mean, you feel like, wow, okay. And the thing is, ultimately, like, I don't have this, like, to me, it was this fun experiential thing. I don't have a big head about it, like, oh my God, I'm this great guy, because the reality is there's a ton of great singers out there, and to be on the show, you really have to check kind of the boxes. And I think I was just fortunate I checked some boxes for them. I mean, I'm kind of old, right? And relative to these 19-year-olds that are on the show, and 14, I guess there was a 14-year-old, Levi, who was on my team. He was 14,
Holy shit.
So I'm kind of old, I was turning 50, and so I'm fit. I don't necessarily look that old, really. And then I was also a rocker, and they don't have a lot of rockers, you know.
No, they don't.
Yet when you look at the dynamic of, there's a lot of people that watch this show that are in my age range, and they really love the show. And so for them, man, seeing a rocker, they're like, cool, there's a rocker on, you know. And so they kind of want to, you know. So I don't know. There was just a lot of boxes I ticked for them to want to have me. And I'm like a responsible guy. I'm not an asshole. I'm dependable, you know, all that sort of stuff. And that's the other thing. You know, you can't go there and hang out for 3 weeks prepping to do this and that around all these people and all that and be a jerk. They're just not going to put up with you. You know, they'll send you home. And I've seen people do it. I've seen people get sent home, you know, so it was when I think back of it, it was fascinating to think that I made it through the process, and then just getting there. I mean, all the people associated with the show were really nice. The contestants were all really nice. I feel like I made some really good friends, and you know, in that regard. And it wasn't like a reality show where they try to make you look bad too. They just solely want you to look good. That's their whole thing, you know. So no, I mean, I had a great time, and I had this fantasy, like, I thought, man, because I love Jukebox Hero was my song right from the beginning. That was my a cappella song. I did that for my, you know, I did it the whole way. I mean, granted, I would do other songs too, but that was my one. So when I got there for my blind audition, I thought I was just in heaven, and like, I wanted to be able to do those kind of ad-lib stuff at the end where I get to hit those higher notes. Yeah. I thought, man, if I could be on national TV singing those high notes, it would just be like, yeah. So there was a part of me that once that was done, it was kind of like, all right, that's all I needed to do. You know, like, not like I won, but you know what I mean? Like, that's what I wanted to do. And so the fact that I got to perform a couple more times was pretty cool. So, yeah. So I don't know, I had a lot of fun.
What are the nerves like when? Okay, so I've just watched it, and I remember watching it when it was on, because, you know, my wife will watch The Voice, and I'll kind of perk up when I see a rock person. So when you were on, I was like, wow, all right, this is cool, you know. And I just watched it right before we started talking, and I was just trying to picture, like, what are the nerves like? Because are you thinking, like, what if they don't turn around? What do I have to do to make them turn around? What is going through your mind at this point?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing is, they prepare you pretty well. Like, you don't see the coaches or anything, but I mean, you know, you're practicing your song. I mean, you're there, you know, practicing your song. They bring you to the stage, you know, like, you get to rehearse with the band, and then they also bring you out on the stage. You have like a stage rehearsal where the band's playing behind you. You get to run through the song 3 times. First times, you're just kind of standing there getting a monitor mix, and then, you know, the other times you're supposed to pretend like it's your live thing. And, you know, they have vocal coaches and people that, you know, talk to you and stuff. And I mean, they even have like, kind of like, not choreographers, but kind of stage people that'll watch you perform and maybe give you some tips and some pointers and stuff like, hey, how do you want to communicate this song? You know, you only got 90 seconds. How do you want to tell this story kind of thing? So I think when I came out, I kind of had a game plan of how, you know, I only had 90 seconds, so I kind of had a game plan of, okay, I'm going to start here, I'm going to do this. Not like I had every move mapped out, but I kind of had some ideas, okay, I'm going to go here on this, I might do this, and da-da-da, that. And so because of that, like, the most nerve-wracking thing for me was when you walk out there, it's deathly silent. There's like 500 people in the studio. You can see them, but they're deathly silent. It's pretty dark. The 4 coaches, their backs turned to you. You walk up to your little spot on the stage, and they don't announce you nothing, you know. And then I'm just sitting there, and like, the band is actually kind of quiet because they're behind you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is a live band, but they're behind you, and even when they're jamming, like, they're really not that loud compared to what I'm used to in the heavy metal world, you know. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there, like, faintly listening for the tick tick tick, you know, the drummer Nate doing the 4 count in. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to be on time. Like, I don't want to screw this, you know, because because when you come out and you perform and they film you, that's your chance.
Right.
Like, if you fucking all up, they're gonna, you know, if you screw it up, that's it. You screwed up your chance, you know. So they'll prepare you, but once it's on, it's on. And I was the first person to go that day. I was like the second day of auditions, but I was the first person to go that day. So it was a little nerve-wracking. But yeah, I was like kind of pretty nervous to start. But then once, like, I got rolling and I was in the groove, you know, like, the minute I started singing, then it was like, I was just on. I was going to do my thing. And so the funny thing is, like, I guess I kind of noticed, like, if you watch me, like, John Legend turned, and he was really surprised me because I thought he was the last person who would turn.
Right.
But if you'll notice, I'm kind I'm kind of doing my thing. Like, he was rocking out to me, and I know that now from watching the show. I didn't even notice while I was performing, because I was engaging with the crowd. There was a crowd out there, and I was pointing at people in the crowd and rocking it out, and walking from one side of the stage, because I wanted to cover the stage nicely and stuff. And so I was just having fun, getting ready to do my thing, and so I kind of didn't really notice. And I think toward the end, and once, I will tell you one thing, you can see it on the countenance, on the face of the people. Once somebody turns, you can see their face light up, because there's this relief that sets in,
Yeah.
And so having John turn right away, that certainly was a good thing. And then having Blake turn toward the end, that felt good too. And I thought I really knocked it out of the park. I mean, I hate to sound arrogant. I was kind of like, why didn't these other two turn, man?
Yeah, right.
What more do I got to do?
No kidding. It is amazing.
Probably sounds arrogant, but I thought, well, Kelly, the thing is, Kelly, I remember reading years ago that she likes 80's rock, and I'm sitting there thinking, what the heck, Kelly? I mean, what's a guy got to do to get you to turn? Well, the funny thing is, she was like, "Oh, I forgot to hit my button," or something like that. They edited that out, but that's what she said during the thing. And so I don't know. I didn't. Nick Jonas was a wild card for me. I didn't know what he would think.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so it was an interesting experience, but definitely very nerve-wracking. And so the one thing I would say is, like, my second performance with Joey Fulco, where we did, and neither one of us, that was not a song either one of us picked. I knew the song, the Tina Turner Simply the Best, but it turns out it was a really good song for my vocal range, and they must have known that or something. I don't know, but for some reason, from the get-go, I knew I'd probably get hooked up with Joey, because she had a little more of a rock vibe, and it made sense for us to be together. And that performance, we had prepared really well, and she and I thought we had a great dynamic going. And right before I went on stage, I was in kind of the hallway, like, they kind of call you in like it's a boxing match, and for the battle round, or at least they did at the time. And she was on one side, I was on the other, and so you're walking on your own hallway. And I remember looking out and seeing the crowd and up at the lights. And I remember, my older brother Rick had said, I told him I was feeling a little nervous. He's like, "Dude, it's just singing, and just have fun." And so I remember being very in the moment for that performance. So when I rewatch that performance, I can just see and tell that I was just having so much fun, because, like, she and I had gone into the vocal booth behind the stands or whatever, and practiced with the vocal coach, and she's like, "Oh, it sounds great." I had the harmony down. I was just feeling so good, and they were playing other music, pumping up the crowd and stuff, and because we were once again the first ones to go on that day. And so I was just getting all pumped up, and I remember looking up and just saying, "When are you ever going to do this again, man? Just enjoy this moment." And so I don't know, I was, how they say you have to be in the moment? I was very in the moment. Like, I just was really in the moment for that performance. So I love Jukebox Hero. That's kind of my favorite, but that one's a pretty damn close second for me. And not so much of the song, just because of my memory of how great it felt to be there and to be performing and with someone and stuff.
Yeah, so that's awesome. I got to ask you this, 80's glam bands, did you like them? Any that you got into?
I mean, I have trouble remembering who they consider glam or not. The one thing I would say, like, in the 80's, I tended to listen to, like, the bands that were all over MTV and all over the radio. So, like, a Poison or, like, Bon Jovi, stuff like that. I wasn't so into them, not like I hate them, but, like, they were all over. And, like, to me, I was more into the more discreet bands that, first of all, I just liked great singers. But I was into more of the bands that they had a great singer, and also you didn't know them as much, because it felt cooler to like a band that wasn't so hip and wasn't so popular. So that's why I like, Warrior and Shy and Malice and Q5, and I like bands like that. But obviously I liked Iron Maiden. I loved Queensryche. I remember listening to, there was a band called Heavy Pettin' that I used to listen to. They had this really high singer, and God, I can't even think of all that. Leatherwolf, I remember having a couple of their albums, and I can't remember I think I had a Poison album or two, so I like all those bands. Dokken, the thing is, like, with Dokken, like, I never really had to buy their albums because they were all over the radio and stuff, and I think my other brother liked them and he would play them. So there's bands like that, like Led Zeppelin. That's one of the funny ones. Like Led Zeppelin, like, I never bought their album until they put out that Mothership album, like, probably been 20 years ago now, but they put out this greatest hits 2-disc thing, and that's when I bought it, because they were all over the radio. I consider them like an influence, but I didn't even have to buy it because it was all over the radio. I used to hear it all the time,
So you've worked with a lot of projects. Who would you love to work with? Who would you love to get the call from to say, "Hey, Todd, we need you as vocalist"? Is there somebody up there in your mind that you're thinking of?
Wow. I think for me, I mean, you kind of have fantasies in your head, like maybe somebody who it would be neat to be hooked up with someone that has, like a fair amount of cachet that you'd probably get to play some good shows.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously someone like a Slash comes to mind, but I don't know that Slash and my style, I don't really consider myself a bluesy guy, even though I probably could sing a little bit of that. I don't really consider that. I think for me, that's a tough one, because then some of the bands you think about, well, I wouldn't, like I love Iron Maiden or I love Queensryche, but Todd Latour is doing a beautiful job, so this is no slam on him. Like I don't know that I'd want to try to replace Jeff Tate and Queensryche. I mean, that just seems like a lot of pressure. I wouldn't want to replace Sebastian Bach and Skid Row, stuff like that.
Right.
So I think for me, I don't know why, but right now I'd say, there's probably a lot of people that I would like to, but for some reason Tommy Shaw sticks out in my head. And I think the reason is he just seems like a good, decent guy. He's a great singer. I know he's a great songwriter, and I feel like it would be so cool to be hooked up with someone who could sing like crazy, and sing along with me, and we could write songs together. So probably Tommy Shaw right now would be my guy that I would, that I would really love to get a call from.
That would be awesome, man. But, hey, I appreciate the conversation. Had a great time talking with you. Anything you want to say to the people that have been following you all these years?
I've just been so blessed. I mean, at this point in my life, I mean, I'm doing things that I kind of thought were long gone. And I get messages from people and direct messages now and then, or posts on things and the positive comments. And just hearing from people that my music has touched them is, I mean, to me, that's a thing. I've been touched by music when I was younger, and it's been like the soundtrack of my life, and kind of that's my fantasy. That's why I do it, because I feel like, man, I love to perform, and I love to write too, and I feel like, man, if I could be that for somebody else, that would just be so awesome. And so I just, just really thankful for the people that listen and give you that good feedback, because that's the kind of thing that fuels my passion and makes me want to do it for us. Thank you very much.
All right, brother. Have a great night.
All right, you too.
Well, that was great talking with Todd. Make sure you go check out his album, Sonic Healing. There's a lot of cool things on the way from the 80's Glam Metalcast. As always, you should subscribe so you don't miss any of it. Rock on!